3:17 a.m. I'm sitting in my pickup truck with a cup of coffee that went cold around the time the sun went down yesterday. 7 hours ago. The cup's still in my hand because putting it down would mean admitting I've been sitting here that long. I'm not here for a patient. I'm not waiting for test results. I'm here because this is the only place in this city where a man can park his truck at 3 in the morning without getting towed, ticketed, or questioned by a cop who wants to know why a 48-year-old man is sleeping in a Ford F-150. 48 years old. Let that sink in. My mother's Bible is on my lap. I'm not reading it. I stopped reading it 20 years ago. But I'm holding it. Clutching it, really. The way you hold a life raft when you're not sure you want to be rescued but you're also not ready to drown. She was always waiting on God. Always saying He'd show up. Always telling me to hold on. I whisper into the cold cab of my truck, Mom prayed for me all those years. Every single morning. Every single night. And now she's dead, and look at me. Mirror moment. You know that feeling when you say something out loud and it hangs in the air like a verdict? Like you've just confessed to yourself what you've been hiding from everyone else? That's what 3:17 a.m. in a deserted parking lot does. 14 months. That's how long I've been unemployed. 87 rejection emails. I've counted every single one. Some of them were polite. We appreciate your interest, however. Some of them were form letters so generic they didn't even have my name filled in. Dear applicant. After 14 years at the same company, after giving them my best years in my marriage and my health, I got a 30-minute meeting with HR and a cardboard box for my desk photos. The divorce was 6 years ago. I told myself I was fine. I told my daughter Emily I was fine. I told everyone at church before I stopped going that God was teaching me something. That was a lie. God wasn't teaching me anything. I wasn't letting Him. I was too busy being angry, too busy being proud, too busy pretending I could fix everything myself. Emily is 19 now. She thinks I'm on a business trip. I told her I'm consulting. Consulting. That's what you call it when you spend your days in a library applying for jobs you're overqualified for and your nights in a hospital parking lot because you can't afford rent anymore. She texts me goodnight every evening, and I text back from wherever I'm parked, lying about hotel rooms and client meetings. I haven't told her the truth. How do you tell your daughter that her father is one missed payment away from living in his truck permanently? The Bible on my lap belonged to Eleanor. My mother. She died 3 years ago this October. I stood at her graveside in a black suit that still fit me then, my jaw clenched, my eyes dry. I was still employed. Still confident. Still Christian enough to know the hymns but not broken enough to need the God they were about. I watched them lower her into the ground and I felt nothing. That's not true. I felt proud. Proud that I was holding it together. Proud that I didn't need to cry. Proud that I was strong. The joke's on me now. Because here I am, 3 years later, in a truck that's 3 payments behind, and for the first time since she died, I'm crying. Not the kind of crying you do at funerals where you're performing grief for an audience. The ugly kind. The kind where your chest heaves and no sound comes out because you've forgotten how to let it. The kind where tears just fall onto worn leather and you don't wipe them away because who's watching? The dumpster? I open the Bible. Not to read. Just to touch something she touched. The inside flap has her handwriting. I've seen it 1,000 times but tonight it hits different. She wrote, "For David, for the day you need it most." I've prayed for that day. Love, Mom. I've read those words before and felt nothing but nostalgia. Tonight they feel like a prophecy. Did she know? Did she somehow know there would be a night like this? A 3:17 a.m. in a hospital parking lot where her son would have nothing left? No job. No wife. No home. No pride. Just a Bible he doesn't know how to read anymore and a prayer life that's been dead longer than she has. Her voice comes back to me. That refrain she said so many times it became background noise in my life. David, God will never abandon you, even when you abandon him. I used to roll my eyes. I used to change the subject. I used to think it was just something religious people say to make themselves feel better about a God who doesn't actually show up. A platitude. A cliché. A Christian Hallmark card for people who can't handle reality. But I've got nothing left now. No backup plan. No safety net. No pride to protect. And those words are echoing in this cold truck cab like they were spoken fresh. God will never abandon you, even when you abandon him. The parking lot is still empty. The ambulance sirens have gone quiet. The yellow lights keep flickering, undecided, somewhere between darkness and dawn. I stare at the dedication page. 20 years of distance from faith are pressing on my chest like a physical weight. 20 years of running from a God I stopped believing in because believing hurt too much. 20 years of building a life without prayer, without scripture, without community, and look what I've built. A truck in a parking lot. A daughter I'm lying to. A future that's shrinking every day. I haven't found the verse she underlined yet. I'm not ready to read it. I'm not ready to pray. I'm not sure I even remember how. But something has shifted. A crack in the armor. The smallest opening. For the first time in 20 years, I'm not running. I'm just sitting here. Holding her Bible. Letting the tears fall. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a question is forming that I'm too afraid to ask out loud. What if she was right? What if you're actually here? The coffee cup is empty now. The cold has seeped through my jacket. 4:45 a.m. is still an hour away, and I have no idea what happens next. I don't know if I'll open to the page she marked. I don't know if I'll say a prayer or just keep crying until the sun comes up. I don't know anything right now except that I'm tired of pretending I'm not broken. And that's when it happens. A stranger's hand taps the window. The tap on the window wasn't aggressive. It was hesitant. The kind of knock you give when you're not sure if someone inside is sleeping, crying, or both. I froze. My hand was still resting on my mother's Bible, and my face was still wet. The last thing I needed at 5:12 a.m. in a hospital parking lot was a security guard asking questions I didn't have answers for. Or worse, calling someone. Telling Emily her father was living in his truck. Telling her the tuition payment that was due in 11 days wasn't coming. I didn't move. Maybe if I just sat still enough, he'd think the truck was empty and walk away. He didn't walk away. Another tap. Gentler this time. And then a voice, muffled through the glass, I see you here. Night after night. I'm not here to chase you off. I turned my head slowly, and there he was. His name tag said Marcus. I'm not causing trouble, I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. I'll move if you need me to. Marcus shook his head. You're not in anyone's way, brother. That's not why I'm here. I've been watching your truck for a few weeks now. Different spots, same time of night. I don't know what's happening in your life, but I've been praying for you every time I see this truck. And tonight. He paused, and something in his voice shifted. Tonight, I felt God tell me to come out here. I stared at him. A stranger. A parking lot security guard. Telling me he'd been praying for me. 4 weeks. Without knowing my name, my situation, or anything about me except that I showed up in a hospital parking lot at 3 in the morning and stayed until dawn. But Marcus noticed. And more than that, he prayed. Look, I started, the automatic deflection kicking in. I appreciate it, but I'm fine. Just going through a rough patch. Nothing serious. The lie hung in the air between us like the cold. 10 years ago, he said quietly, I lived in my car for 8 months. Right over there. He pointed toward the far end of the lot, near the maintenance shed. Same hospital. Different truck. Same story. I felt something crack open in my chest. Here was this man, this security guard who could have just told me to move along, could have just ignored the beat-up pickup in the corner of his lot, and instead he was standing in the cold at 5 in the morning, telling me he'd been where I was. Telling me he'd survived it. Why? The question came out before I could stop it. Why would you pray for someone you don't even know? Marcus smiled. The kind of smile that has scars behind it. Because someone prayed for me when I was the stranger in the parking lot. And I made a promise to God that if he got me out of that car, I'd spend the rest of my life watching for the ones who were still in theirs. I looked down at my mother's Bible. Still open to the dedication page. Still unread. 20 years of running from a God I'd convinced myself had abandoned me, and here he was, not in a church service, not in a sermon, not in a lightning bolt from heaven, but in a 60-year-old security guard with a faded uniform and a story that sounded exactly like mine. I lost my job, I said. The words came out fast, like blood from a wound I'd been trying to bandage for months. 17 years. Construction project manager. Never missed a deadline, never had a complaint, and then one Thursday morning they call me into an office and hand me a severance package that won't even cover 3 months of bills. I was gripping the steering wheel now, my knuckles white. I haven't told my daughter. She's in her 2nd year of college, and her tuition payment is due in 11 days, and I have nothing. Nothing. I've been applying for jobs for months, and every single door has slammed in my face. I've got a degree, I've got experience, I've got references, and none of it matters. None of it. Marcus didn't interrupt. He didn't offer advice. He didn't quote scripture at me or tell me everything happens for a reason. He just stood there, listening, his presence steady as a lighthouse. And the worst part? I kept going, words tumbling over each other now. The worst part is I've been pretending. Every Sunday when Emily calls, I tell her work is fine. I tell her I'm busy. I tell her everything's good. And she believes me because she's 20 years old and she should be worrying about exams and friends and her future, not about whether her father is sleeping in a parking lot because he's too ashamed to tell anyone the truth. I stopped. My chest was heaving. I hadn't said any of this out loud, not to anyone. I'd been carrying it alone for months, and now here I was, confessing to a stranger in the dark. Marcus let the silence settle for a moment. Then he nodded toward the Bible in my lap. That yours? My mother's, I said. She died 4 years ago. I haven't opened it in 20 years. Tonight was the first time. He was quiet for a beat. Then, has she underlined anything in there? The question caught me off guard. What? Your mother. Did she underline verses? My mother used to underline hers. Whole passages. She'd write notes in the margins, little prayers, dates when she was praying for something specific. Marcus pulled something from his pocket, a worn leather Bible, smaller than mine, held together with a rubber band. I found this in her things after she passed. I'd been living in my car for about 3 months at that point. Hadn't talked to God in years. But one night, I opened it, and I saw a verse she'd underlined 20 years before. Isaiah 41 verse 10. She'd written my name next to it. And the date. I stared at him. My mother's Bible felt suddenly heavy in my hands. I'd been holding it for hours, touching the cover, reading her dedication, but I hadn't actually opened it. I'd been too afraid of what I might find, or what I might not find. Have you looked? Marcus asked gently. Have you searched for what she might have underlined for you? I shook my head. I've only kept it as a keepsake. I never actually read it. Why don't you? He stepped back from the window, giving me space. I'll be over by the entrance if you need me. But David, he paused. You're not alone in this parking lot. And you're not invisible. God sees you. He sent someone to knock on your window tonight. That's not an accident. He walked away before I could respond. I didn't open my mother's Bible that night. The Bible stayed on my passenger seat for 3 more days. I'd look at it every time I got in the truck, that worn burgundy cover, the gold letters fading, and I'd feel this pull in my chest, this strange mixture of hope and terror. Because opening it meant facing whatever she'd written. It meant admitting I'd been running from her prayers for 20 years. Here's what nobody tells you about hitting bottom: it doesn't happen once. It happens in waves. You think you've reached the lowest point, and then another bill arrives. Another rejection email. Another night where you stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m. and calculate how many weeks you have left before everything runs out. And Emily kept calling. Every Sunday afternoon, like clockwork. Hey Dad, how's work? And I'd say, busy, you know how it is. That's the thing about pride disguised as strength. You think you're protecting the people you love, but you're actually building a wall they can't climb. On the 4th night, I finally opened the Bible. I started with Psalms because that's where my mother always went when life got hard. And there they were, her notes in the margins, written in blue ink, her handwriting small and precise like she was afraid of running out of space. Next to Psalm 27, she'd written, David is struggling with fear. Praying for courage. I kept reading. Jeremiah 29 verse 11, for I know the plans I have for you, and in the margin, David lost his job. He doesn't see a future. Lord, show him you do. 9 years ago. Romans 8 verse 28, all things work together for good, and her note, David called today. He sounds so tired. Please give him rest. Page after page. Year after year. Every season of my life, every crisis, every failure, every silent battle I thought I'd fought alone, she'd been in her living room with this Bible open, writing my name next to promises she was claiming on my behalf. I sat there on my couch at 2 a.m. with tears running down my face, and I realized something that rearranged everything inside me. I had never been alone. Not once. Not in the divorce, not in the career collapses, not in the months of unemployment, not in that hospital parking lot. My mother had been praying. And the God she prayed to had been listening. But here's the honest part, and I promised myself I'd tell you the truth. I did not receive a job the next day. I did not experience an instant miracle. For 3 more months I wrestled with depression, dwindling funds, and the temptation to just give up entirely. Some mornings I'd open that Bible and read her prayers and feel hope rise in my chest. Other mornings I'd open it and feel nothing but anger. Why would a God who heard her prayers let me sit in this mess for so long? The Hebrew understanding of what God means when he says, I will strengthen you, in Isaiah 41 verse 10, the verse Marcus's mother had underlined for him, it doesn't mean removal of the trial. It means provision within it. It's not a promise of escape. It's a promise of enablement. The word carries this sense of being girded up, equipped for action, given capacity you didn't have before. God wasn't offering me a helicopter out of my circumstances. He was offering me legs strong enough to walk through them. That became my daily anchor. Every morning, before I checked my email for rejection notices, before I calculated how many days I had left, I'd read Isaiah 41 verse 10 aloud in my empty apartment. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. And then I'd look at my mother's notes in the margin and remember that those words had been prayed over me for decades before I ever claimed them for myself. The phone call with Emily happened on a Tuesday. I was sitting in my truck outside the grocery store, trying to decide which bills I could delay so I could afford food for the week, and she called. Hey Dad, just checking in. You sounded weird on Sunday. And something broke open. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was those months of prayers finally softening something in me. Maybe it was realizing that my mother had never pretended to be strong for me, she'd just been faithful. But I told Emily the truth. All of it. The job loss, the parking lot, the empty apartment, the fear that I was failing her as a father. She was quiet for a long moment. And then she started crying. Not the kind of crying you do when you're disappointed, the kind you do when you're relieved. "Dad," she said, "I thought you didn't need me anymore. I thought you were fine without me. Every Sunday you'd say everything was good, and I'd think maybe you were happier without me around." That moment rearranged me. I'd spent months hiding my weakness because I thought it would protect her. And all it had done was make her feel abandoned. My pride, dressed up as strength, had been keeping out the very people God had given me to walk through this with. Vulnerability is not weakness masquerading as something else. Vulnerability is the doorway to real relationship with people and with God. You cannot be loved if you refuse to be known. You cannot be helped if you refuse to admit you're drowning. And you cannot experience the fullness of grace if you're still pretending you don't need it. I started attending the small church where Marcus worshipped. Not because I was suddenly pious. Not because I had all my theological questions answered. But because I'd finally admitted I could not carry everything alone. The first Sunday I walked in, Marcus didn't make a big deal of it. He just slid over on the pew and handed me a hymnal open to the right page, like he'd been saving me a seat for years. After 3 months, I received a job offer. Not as a project manager. Not with the salary I'd had before. A coordinator position at a smaller company, with lower pay and fewer benefits. The old David, the one who measured his worth by his title and his paycheck, would have seen that as failure. But I accepted it with more gratitude than I'd ever felt for any of my previous positions. God's provision often looks different from our expectation, but His faithfulness never does. I had prayed for an open door. God opened a door. It wasn't the one I designed in my mind, but it was the one I needed. The smaller company meant less pressure. The lower salary taught me dependence.